All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a deeply fascinating, frankly vital framework designed specifically for Christian SME owners. And we're talking about the folks navigating that severe, keeps-you-up-at-night kind of business distress. We're focusing on Pillar 9, the inner turnaround. Look, this isn't about some surface-level you-got-this motivation. No, this is a clinical and spiritual framework built for the unseen patient in any corporate crisis, which is the leader's inner life.
We know you're busy, so here's the exact roadmap for today. We're going to cover the limits of perfect spreadsheets, the founder's 3 a.m. wake-up calls, grit versus grace, Pillar 9 itself, and then the 2 modules of the faith advisory tool, the conscience and the comfort.
Section 1. The limits of perfect spreadsheets.
Now, most distressed businesses are already using outward clinical tools, things like the Altman Z-score or those 13-week cash forecasts. In fact, 22 is the exact number of operational apps dedicated to the 8 outward pillars of this particular turnaround framework. They handle the whole shebang, from cash flow to digital transformation, and they are highly effective. But they leave one absolutely crucial gap.
Here's the reality. A perfect 13-week cash forecast is utterly useless if the leader holding it is completely paralyzed inside. A corporate crisis is literally never just a corporate event. Think about it. If a leader is isolated by fear, they're going to negotiate from panic. If they're gripped by shame, they'll delay the necessary amputation that the Z-score already proved they needed. The business plan might be totally sound, but the organism, the leader themselves, ends up rejecting it.
Section 2. The founder's 3 a.m. Diagnosing the leader. So let's step out of the boardroom and into the consulting room for a minute. The critical thing here is separating the fear of, say, missing payroll from the deep, crushing shame that keeps a founder staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. Fear is future-facing, right? It's anticipating a loss that hasn't even happened yet. And in small doses, that can actually sharpen your decisions. But shame? Shame is past-facing. It's a full-blown identity crisis. It's the inability to separate company worth from self-worth. When a founder starts believing that business failure equals personal failure, they don't just delay bad news, they actively hide it. They might tell themselves they're protecting their people, but actually, if we're being honest, they're really just protecting themselves.
And, this shame leads to just profound isolation. Imagine a leader's social circle as a set of rings. Ring 3, out on the edge, represents the staff and peers who think everything is totally fine. Ring 2 knows there's a struggle, but they don't know the gory details. Ring 1 represents the people who actually know the real numbers and the true danger. For most distressed leaders, that Ring 1 is completely empty. And it's that extreme isolation that degrades decision quality more than anything else.
Section 3. Depleting grit versus infinite grace. Coping with isolation. So how in the world do leaders cope with that kind of crushing pressure? Well, secular management science usually points to grit. But grit is basically a fuel tank. It drains over time under sustained pressure. And you have to rely on rest or just sheer, stubborn willpower to refill it. It absolutely has a ceiling. But for the Christian business owner, there's a theological alternative, and that is biblical grace. Unlike grit, grace isn't a tank that empties out, it's an infinite tap. You draw upon it rather than drawing it down.
This whole concept is anchored in scriptures like 2 Corinthians 12:9. The radical idea here is that grace kicks in precisely at the point of admitted weakness. True strength doesn't come from successfully hiding your struggles from the board. It comes from acknowledging the absolute limit of your own capacity and relying on a source that is completely outside of yourself.
Section 4. Pillar 9. The faith advisory. Which brings us to the 9th invisible organ system of Dr. Mike Tang's turnaround framework. This builds the compelling case that a leader's inner integrity is the absolute guarantor of those other 8 outward pillars. You simply can't have true financial health if a leader lacks the basic honesty to report a bad number. Operational excellence, that requires the moral courage to pull the plug on a failing initiative. And trust, which is literally the oxygen of any turnaround, depends entirely on a leader making small, honest choices in private when nobody else is watching. Pillar 9 is where that heavy, unglamorous work actually happens.
To actually operationalize this, there's an application called faithadvisory.org. And the design brief for this is fascinating. It's a stark, very serious interface. No confetti, no digital badges, no emojis. Just this dark ink and parchment vibe with 2 doors representing the soul of the business. These doors house 2 modules that do completely opposite things: conviction and consolation.
Section 5. Module 1. The conscience. So this first door is designed strictly for the conviction and examination of the leader. The central question it asks is totally unflinching. What did I do? It essentially forces the leader to examine their exact decisions during the distress. We aren't talking about generic ethical dilemmas here. We're talking about the very real, very tough choices you made when the pressure was on.
And the tool grounds these questions in brutal, local realities, specifically mapped to Singaporean SME owners. It tests your obligations across different phases of a turnaround. We're talking real-world scenarios, like facing a Friday payroll shortfall when CPF enforcement is looming right over your shoulder, or having to figure out creditor sequencing. It asks which option comes closest to what you would actually do, and then it returns exactly what Scripture teaches about that specific intent.
But here is the absolute most critical design constraint of the entire framework, the hard rule. There are absolutely 0 scores, no grades, no percentages. This is a massive psychological safety net. The tool never ever judges the user's overall standing with God or their worth as a human being. It only counts decisions and examines whether those specific actions align with scriptural principles.
Section 6, Module 2, The Comfort.
Now, if that first door was all about clinical conviction, this second door is about deep, necessary consolation. The central question flips entirely. Now it asks, what is happening to me? It addresses 24 very specific circumstances of sorrow, like the burning shame of a called personal guarantee, or just the bone-deep exhaustion of a grind that never seems to end. And importantly, it never asks the user how they feel, because a leader in a failing company doesn't just experience this as a business problem, they experience it as pure dread. So it simply asks them to name the circumstance.
The tool is extremely clear about what this module does and doesn't do. It provides scriptures of lament, a thoughtful reflection, and a prayer for that exact situation you're in. What it never does, though, is diagnose mental health. It'll actively refer users to crisis lines if needed. And it never falsely promises a commercial recovery as some sort of reward for faithfulness. I mean, Job didn't get his first children back, right? To promise a magical business turnaround would be lying to someone who is in absolutely no condition to be lied to.
Ultimately, a verse like Psalm 55:22 isn't offered as some magical exemption from hardship. It is a promise of sustaining power. It tells the leader that they can finally hand over that crushing internal weight even while the external financial exposure remains. So it leaves us with this one final question. When the perfect spreadsheets finally run out of answers, are you ready to step through the door, name the reality, and stop carrying the weight all by yourself?